you have to back up a little bit, and you'll see I'm going to be a difficult interview because I'm going to tell you things you didn't ask. When I became county judge in 2007, it was already set that a group had been given exclusive rights to develop the dome into a hotel. So I had nothing to question. I mean, I went, okay, that's been decided. Well, that fell through. It never was going to work. I mean, the group had never built a hotel. They didn't have any funding, and it's really not conducive to that in the long run. So that's what caused us to go back and ask for other ideas. And at the end, we came up with the concept of a multi-purpose facility that would have filled in the hole, would have done a lot of that. We did a pretty poor job of selling it because we allowed the media and others to refer to it as a convention center. And we already had 2 convention centers. You know, you got George R. Brown downtown. We have NRG Center right across the street from it. So that played into it. Plus, there was just a mindset against bond issues. At the same time, the county had another bond issue on to create a joint processing center that will allow the city to close its jail, saves the taxpayer $25 million a year, makes our criminal justice system more efficient. Everybody was in favor of it. Not a single word was ever written or spoken against the Joint Processing Center. It passed by 475 votes. So you had a lot of people who were just voting against any bond. And then you have some people that, and it's a valid position for them to take, they just think we should tear down the dome and move on. So you combine those two, and it was kind of doomed from the beginning. It's a building. It belongs to the taxpayers. It's paid off. It's, depending on how you configure it, it's 360,000 square feet of column-free space that belong. Like I said, it belongs to the taxpayers. So before we tear down this building, I think we need to look at every opportunity to put it into a productive use. And productive use doesn't necessarily mean makes money. I mean, parks don't typically make money, but they're an amenity that the taxpayers have paid for and they choose to support. So that's where we are right now. Hundreds, literally hundreds. You know, we have all the normal ones. A lot of people say hotel, apartments, condominiums, shopping centers, indoor theme parks, water parks. Several groups, you know, point to the fact that in Dubai they have a indoor snow ski area. You know, that could do. The one I bring up a lot was the one gentleman who wrote and said he wanted to just flood it and reenact naval battle scenes. That'd be kind of cool. I'd go watch that. And then you have, we had a movie studio, and that was what we thought was a real idea. People from Hollywood coming here and building it out to use it to make movies. The one that comes up most often, though, people will say, well, we should put a casino in there. And I keep going, well, that's great, but casino gambling is not legal in the state of Texas. So that's beyond my pay grade.
Okay. What's the most far out proposal you've gotten that you kind of laugh at? I know you mentioned that
the one about flooding it and reenacting naval battle scenes is pretty far out there. I don't know that I could pick one. I mean, you know, we've had botanical gardens and all kinds of things like that.
Typewriter museum. I got that one.
A lot of people want to make museums of various kinds, and we can do that. In fact, if we preserve the field itself, you've got about a 9-acre park, and then on the upper levels, you could turn that into exhibit space of all kinds. For example, automobiles. That could be a traveling exhibit that comes in there, or it could be a permanent exhibit where you have kind of the world-class auto museum. science, technology, petroleum, all those kinds of things could go in there. Although the historian for the Astros, as a private citizen, is very keen on preserving the dome, and he had an event last weekend where he had a model of the dome and had people come talk about the ideas. Right. So, but that's the only, no, the Astros have no formal position. And with regard to the Texans and the rodeo, I had to remind everybody they're tenants. It's not their building. And I think that there was some miscommunication there, that they kind of jumped off a cliff. And just so I can be absolutely clear about the silly comment, when they first presented the idea, I was not keen on it. But the full comment about it being silly came after a speech. I didn't give the speech. I was asked by a reporter, afterwards. Well, what about the rodeo plan? I said, well, it's a silly plan because if you're going to tear down the dome, go ahead and tear it down. Don't put up a bunch of little markers saying this is where Harmon Killebrew hit his 500th home run. Nobody's going to care. So why spend $66 million in the process of tearing it down to recreate something that I thought at the time would be laughable, and now other people are looking at it too, saying you tear down the dome and then you build this little mini model of it out in the middle. No, although I think the Texans are certainly concerned about that. They want it to look nice, and we want it to look nice. But when it came up prior to Houston and Harris County being awarded the Super Bowl, the question was raised, oh, we can't get the Super Bowl unless the dome is gone. And I reminded everybody the Super Bowl came here once before and the dome was sitting there. And not a single person, I defy anybody to find anybody who said, oh, this was a miserable experience because that dome was sitting over there. And then the other, I kept getting word that the NFL was concerned about the area around the venue where the Super Bowl was going to be played. And I asked, well, where was the Super Bowl played the year before the decision? Of course, it was New Orleans. You've been in the area around the Superdome in New Orleans? I mean, so everybody kind of backed off on that. We do need to make sure it looks good no matter what the status is of it at the time, because we want Houston and Harris County to put their best face on for the Super Bowl. Of course, before the Super Bowl, we have the NCAA Final Four, which actually attracts more. Everybody focuses on the Super Bowl. That's a one-day event, but the NCAA Final Four packs this place for a whole weekend. Because parks are dynamic things. They change. If you look at Herman Park or Memorial Park, the things that are in them now are not the same as they were 30 years ago. And I mentioned a few things at the press conference, and I'll mention them now, but that just allows people to go jump at it and say, well, he's going to turn it into this or that. But some of the things that have come up, my biggest problem is people keep wanting to fill the playing field with basketball courts or lap pools or this or that. And I keep saying, no. We need to keep the 9-acre green space and then decide there could be temporary things that go in there. For example, the person from the Parks and Wildlife Department, as soon as he heard me say about the indoor park, he said, what we really need is a place to have archery, big archery tournaments in Texas. And I didn't realize it, but archery evidently is a huge sport, just a booming new sport. And there aren't many places to do that. And so it would lend itself to that fairly well. I immediately got a phone call from somebody who said, you know what, we're always looking for a place to have the state championship horseshoes tournament. And that's what caused a blogger to pick on me and say, Grady wants to turn it into the world's largest horseshoe pit. No, I didn't say that. But it would be a use that a lot of people would come here for. I mean, and I jokingly said, well, if you're going to do horseshoes, then you may as well pitch washers too, because I don't know if you ever pitched washers growing up, but I grew up in East Texas, and that was something we did. But it can be any number of things. Clearly, there will be hiking and biking facilities in there because there are a lot of people who would love to get that kind of exercise that can't get out in the heat, can't get out in the outdoor environment. So if you have a climate controlled place to do that, the medical center has already weighed in and said they're very interested in having a facility like that. We've had, I've already been approached, and since they sent me a letter, it's a public record, the Texas Mountain Biking Association has offered to design, build, maintain, pay for a mountain biking facility inside. You could do a pretty whiz-bang thing in there. I've had people say it would be great to have zip lines, and a zip line from the top of the dome somewhere could be a real money maker actually, because people would go off and do that. And you know that those are all over the world. You have zip lines. So the other things though are one county commissioner, and I agree with him, is really keen on trying to put a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics facility in. A lot of parks have museums. Well, this would be an educational venue. There are other places around the world that have converted large buildings into what they call edutainment, combination of entertainment and education. I don't claim to be the creative one to know what all those are, but you could do a lot of things. Think about this. The kind of light show you could put on in there could be tremendous. Clearly, we would need a venue for concerts. You put a concert shell. I continue to say you put it over in one corner, but then I say, well, but it's round. It really doesn't have corners. But in one spot, you just put a concert shell, because the nearest one, we have Miller Outdoor Theater in Herman Park, but Cynthia Woods Mitchell up in the Woodlands is the closest thing, and they're booked all the time. But we could bring a lot of acts in here to do that. But the other thing is just the open space itself. We have 75 to 100 festivals and gatherings, major festivals and gatherings, every year in Houston and Harris County. How many of those would want to move to where they're protected from the weather, particularly those that have 3 or 4 day runs? They'd be in there in a heartbeat. Offshore Technology Conference clearly could use a big open space, whether they did exhibits in there or whether they did it for a big picnic for the attendees. So it's almost an endless set of possibilities. And in fact, based on all the emails, and in fact I am privy to a survey that was taken that was not taken by any side, but just to see what people thought about it. It comes back pretty overwhelmingly in favor of the park idea. The devil's going to be not in the details, but in the cost. That if we can develop the park, I'm convinced if the county, even without a bond issue, if we can put together the money to put the green field in and to clean up the dome and make it a place that, you know, isn't ugly and dangerous to go in, that you start having festivals and gatherings and OTC, when people walk onto that field and look up at that magnificent structure over them, they'll be hooked. People will say, yeah, we got to keep this.
No.
It has to be much less, just intuitively. The multi-purpose center started with the idea of filling the hole, because the playing field sits about 30 feet below ground, and that alone was going to cost $15 million if you can get enough dirt to fill the hole. So you start with that saving. But again, it depends on what you put in. I believe we could do the field, put the clear glass back on top. Surely the Aggies can figure out a way to grow grass in there. I'm convinced of that. And then we power wash the whole thing, remove all the asbestos. We're well down that road. And do the landscaping around the outside so that it looks nice. And then we see what comes. You know, if somebody wants to raise money for the STEM project, great, they can do that. If the mountain bikers and if Commissioner's Court agreed that, yeah, that's a facility to go in, great. Are there philanthropies and others? Would the Texas Medical Center maybe want to put a facility in there so that people could exercise? Not only do they have a lot of patients, they have a lot of families that come with their out-of-town patients, and 100,000 people work in the Texas Medical Center every day. So, you know, having a park nearby that they've got Herman Park next door, but it's not. It's outside. During the week leading up to the Super Bowl, they always have what's called Fan Zone. Right now, that's planned for Discovery Green and George R. Brown downtown. Some of that could still be down there, but if you could move on to an actual, you know, you could recreate for that week a football field, and you could turn that over to the NFL and say, create your fan zone on a football field right next to the venue where the Super Bowl is going to be held. You could bring in a traveling exhibit. There are all kinds of people who are memorabilia and they're selling things related to the Super Bowl. You could put so many of those around the circles in the dome. So I'd love for the fan to be able to go in there, get on the field, do all the normal things that they do in a fan zone, and then all around the side walls you could be running a constant video, for lack of a better word, of things related to the history of the NFL and the Super Bowl and leading up to it. And you could have a series of films. You know, NFL films are really pretty good. I mean, you know, they can bring you to tears, or they can, you know, evoke emotions. And you have a whole special place set up for those kind of films. And then at night, you could really go in and you could almost recreate, you know, a starry night on the inside of the dome and turn it into a giant picnic, or, you know, whatever. So I think the fans would benefit greatly, and because of being adjacent to the light rail line and downtown, you could really have people moving from Discovery Green to the dome, back and forth, and there are a lot more hotels downtown than there are near the dome, although I think in years to come that's going to change. I don't think the dome will be the economic generator. I think the Texas Medical Center, combined with the facilities at NRG, the broader NRG Park, will just make people look up and say, you know, we're going to start putting more and more hotels down in that area.